Hey guys, my name is xOctoManx and this is part 8 of my Chrono Trigger inventory system tutorial, which is Patreon supported. So if you want to support this series or any other series as well, feel free to go to patreon.com/xOctoManx. Okay, what we want to do in this part is we want to make sure that we can read the infos about the items while we are going through the list. And currently, when the horizontal finger is basically on the correct item, we're going to read the data and pass it into our info box. And what we also want to do is we want to implement scroll rect. That means when we are scrolling through our inventory in here, then we want to make sure that it is going up and down left according to when the finger position is currently in the very bottom or in the very top. It's going to measure if there is something we can go over up and down, and yeah, that's what we want to implement in this part. So we can actually organize things in between the most top piece actually and the most bottom one, for example, and we can also have a 100 different items, for example, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what we want to start first with. What I want you to go is go to your options canvas, the inventory panel, the item panel where the panel is actually in, and to the scroll rect piece in here. The first thing is we need to implement a scroll rect, this one. If you don't find it, yeah, just type in scroll and select this one. So what we want to have in here is we want to make sure that we are able to use scroll rect as its component and of course make use of it. That's why we need that component. What I want you to do is the content in here is going to be our spacer. That's the stuff we are actually what we want to scroll around, and we want to only have a vertical movement, so we can actually disable horizontal. I don't want this to be elastic, even if I don't think that is affecting anything. I want this basically just make it one clamp. I don't want this option to be active, and so the scroll sensitivity basically doesn't matter in any case. You can make this one 30, you can keep it as 1, it doesn't really matter. We don't use any viewports, we don't use any horizontal or vertical scroll bars. Well, if you want to use one you can, but actually you don't need to. If you want this more to implement because of visibility, even if you're using joypad inputs, then again you can go and put one in. Well, currently I don't think I want this. Maybe it's cool for the people, for the players to know how long this inventory currently really is. But I'm not 1% sure if I want that. Maybe I'm gonna implement this one later on because, well, yeah, currently I don't see a point in this. Well, not at the moment. Okay, so with that set up, don't forget to apply the changes to our prefab, so the options canvas remembers all the stuff we just have dragged in here, and we're not losing any connections when we are going to any other scene, for example. And now let's open up our inventory manager script so we can actually implement all the needed stuff in here. So what we at first need is we need some values, or actually some private, or one public and one private variable. The first one is going to be for our scroll rect, and the second one is going to be for our specific finger counter. I will go and explain this one in a moment. And what you also need to implement is using unityengine.ui if you haven't already. Otherwise we are not able to use the scroll rect at that point. But beforehand, let's go into the use and order functionality and let's implement the readability of our item. So the first one is, the first piece in here for inventory select. Go down to where it says keycode.y and inventory current option is going to be equal to 0. Then we go to inventory use. That's the first time we want to implement the description text. At this point we can say inventory UI.instance, so we call the instance, and what we want to have or want to set is we want to set the description text field dot text to be equal to inventory.instance dot inventory list in square brackets, and now we want to pass in the inventory current option, of course, dot item dot description. So now we pass, with that small line, we pass into the description field, which is of type text. We're gonna pass in our string description into that text field and display this one when we are entering the first time the 1000 part. So when we are going into the info box the first time. We don't want to update this one the whole time. It's only when we do some inputs or some changes happening. So that's what we want to do at first. Don't forget to save the script, and let's go pretty quick into the inventory UI script and make sure that the description text field is in here. If you don't have that right now, I'm not 100% sure if we have added this one already, then make sure that it's a public field of type text and a description text field as well. And since this one is in the options panel, I believe it's pretty much down in the inventory UI. You want to make sure that you're gonna drag in the description text field from the info panel here, this one. You're gonna drag this one into the options canvas description text field on the very top, very bottom in here. Okay, with that done, nothing else need to be done for this particular part. If you have done that already, because I already showed that, of course, you don't need to do that. Okay, let's go further. We don't need inventory UI anymore now, so we can close this one. And what we also want to do is we want to put the same thing directly under the input when we are going up or down with the W or with the S key, and we're gonna check for the current inventory option. So I just gonna copy this complete line in here, copy, and put this one into our movement up and movement down at the very bottom. So we basically do the same. We're gonna read the item description directly from, or from whatever the current item current option is going to be, and pass this one over into the description text field. Don't forget to save. Make sure you have this one in the W and in the S key while we are moving up and down. Not in the order, because the order basically is not affected by that. Well, at least I think so. And let's go back and test this one out at first. So once this has been started, you should be able to go into the inventory now. And once we, as you can see now, it's still some random text in here, so we might want to empty this one first, which is just directly inside. But when we are pressing Y now, you can see it automatically tells us whatever the item is going to be. Also, as you can see, I just have created some new scriptable objects or item types of Azure High Potion. The other potion has been here already. And there are some other ones lying under this one. So as you can see, the finger is going up and down, but this part in here is not scrolling. What you also might want to go in, well, I did this one. I created an items folder in here, and I just created some scriptable object for this one. So of type consumable, I just passed in some description text in here, and of course I filled in the HP amount, or even the MP amount, depending on whatever the potion is going to be. And I filled all the data, of course, into the inventory itself. So I have some items I can play around with. As you can see, I just dragged all of those in here and added some current amounts. I just created 9 items for this one. I also have some double ones in here, 5 times or 4 times the mid potion, but it doesn't really matter for us at the moment, because we want to make sure that we are able to scroll around that stuff in here. Okay, so now the funny part comes about the scrolling inside that scroll rect. We just set it up so far. There's a bit that can be a bit tricky depending on how many items you currently see at the same time. And according to this, there might be some changes you have to go into. So as you can see, I'm gonna press play pretty quick once again, so to explain it. What you can see, I currently show 5 items in total. When you are showing 7 items, you need to change some things later on. If you're showing 10 items at the same time, well, the same applies. But beforehand, I'm gonna go in and explain all of that stuff. So at first, in our movement up and down, we want to make some space in between the current option and of course that. Before we can start, we need to create 2 variables, as I already explained beforehand. So at first it's going to be a public scroll rect, and I just call this one item scroll rect, maybe like that. What we want to do is we want to drag in the scroll rect component, or basically the item which is holding the component which holding that. We want to drag this one inside, so we keep the connection to this one as well. What we also want to have is a private finger counter. Let me just name it finger counter, and this is going to be of type integer, and we're gonna set this one equal to 1. Basically we don't need to set this one, I believe, since we are doing that directly in functionality when we're passing everything over. But yeah, for testing issues, just keep that inside. Don't forget to save, and let's go back to our options canvas. And what we want to do is, first I'm gonna shrink down the inventory itself. But as you can see, now in the inventory manager, we're gonna have at the very bottom that scroll rect. I'm gonna implement a header pretty quick so I can see stuff better. Maybe directly over this one, and just call this one scrolling or something, so I can see stuff once again better when I'm handling things around inside of here. So you can see currently we have 2 lists, the inventory option list, the option list itself, but now we also have something for scrolling, and for scrolling we're gonna need the scroll rect. Okay, and where's our scroll rect? It is in, of course, the item panel, and in here there is the scroll rect. We need to drag this component. This basically is nothing else than an image, I believe, with an image, a mask, and of course the scroll rect itself. So what we want to do is we go to our options canvas and drag the scroll rect piece now inside the scroll rect part in here, and don't forget to apply the changes once again to the prefab, otherwise it's not keeping the connection in this case. Okay, with that done, we can go further inside our use in order functionality, because in here, while we are going through all the items up and down, we want to scroll the items when the finger position, the finger counter actually is 1 or 5, and according to that we're gonna have to change some things. What we also want to do is, before we go into that functionality, after maybe this one in here, which is currently in the inventory select option, I'm gonna zoom in a bit maybe, in the input Y, where we are going into the next, or actually into the use in order functionality, we want to set the finger counter to be equal to 1. Just to make sure finger counter is always 1, we are going to this one, which means our finger is going to be in the very top. So finger counter will only count from 1 to 5, because for me I have 5 items which are matching my spacer. If you have more, well, your number, your finger counter number needs to be, well, whatever the amount of the currently completely seen items is going to be about. Okay, keep that in mind, that's important. So what we want to do is, in use in order, when we are moving the finger up, at that point, well, actually after we have decreased the current inventory option, we want to request whatever the finger counter is. So if the finger counter is bigger than 1, that means it's not in the very top. What we want to do is we want to decrement the finger counter. So finger counter minus minus. That means we want to reduce it until we're gonna match this very top in here. So we're gonna take the inventory current option is going to be 0 at that point, or higher than 0. So if this is 0, finger counter needs to be 1. When this is not the case, so else if the finger counter is going to be equal to 1, finger counter is equal 1, so it's at the very top. What do we want to do at that point is we want to set the scroll rect to the correct option. In this case we say item scroll rect dot, and in here now the funny part comes. We're gonna have a vertical normalized position, which as you can see is a value between 0 and 1, which means 0 is at the very bottom of the complete scroll rect, no matter how long it is. But what you can also now maybe notice is that this complete scroll rect can have different sizes depending on how long or how many items are going to be inside. So the value changes according to the amount of items which is in. So we need to calculate how many steps or how many percent actually we're gonna have to set the amount of scrolling of the item according to the amount of items we're gonna have in the inventory list. Okay, I hope that makes sense in any case. So what we want to do is we want to set the vertical normalized position plus equal, and now we have to calculate everything in between 0 and 1. So we need to know what is the percentage of the item's scroll amount, basically. So at first we calculate 1 divided by inventory UI dot instance, and in here we're gonna have all the item holder, the complete item holder list. If this is private for you, make sure that it is now public. So go to the inventory UI and make item holder list public. That's important, otherwise we don't have access to it. Or create a getter or a set or a get functionality actually, so we can read this and keep this one still private. There are a lot of options to do so. Okay, so what are we now calculating is, of course, we need to know the count, so amount of that. Since the amount is going to return an integer and 1 is an integer, 1 divided by whatever other integer will always return 0. That means we need to convert this thing at first into a float, or in this case typecast this number now into a float. That means we're gonna have a number between 0 and 1, something like 0. Well, whatever the amount is. Let's say we're gonna have 5 items, the float would be returning a 0.2. which is the scroll amount we gonna have or we gonna need to scroll the scroll rect up and down. But the problem is we already see some items. That means if you have only shown 1 item, you don't need to do that. But since we see 5 items, or I currently see 5 items, I need to decrement the amount by 5. And of course I need to encapsulate this one into some parentheses. So this needs to be calculated at first, and then we're gonna divide whatever is coming up there by the rest of that, which means when we have 5 items in the list, there will be this will return 0, and 1 divided by 0 of course returns 0, so we don't have any up or go down going. If we have 7 items, well, or let's say 10, it's easier to calculate, and we're gonna take care of that, and we have a count of 10, we're gonna reduce this by 5. We only have 5, so the scroll amount would return a scroll amount of 0.2 per item. So, and that's what we need to take care of. Okay, don't forget to the semicolon at the very end. And now let's go and do the same stuff in the negative direction, which means we're gonna go down with our finger in our movement down functionality. And what we're gonna do is, once again, if the input and the current option and the inventory instance item holder.count -1, then we go and increment the inventory current option, and of course show the description for the field, which is already working now. But what we also need to do is we need to implement that if else statements once again, but vice versa. So gonna copy this one maybe and put this one in between the current option ++ and the description text field. We only need to do that at the very end after everything else is calculated. What we want to do at that point is we want to check if the finger counter is smaller than 5. Once again, this is the magic number, which is also represented in here, which means I only show 5 items. Once again, if you show 7 or 15 items at the same time, you need to decrement whatever that is by that. Of course, we need to implement or increment the finger counter ++ when we are smaller than this one, because we want to go down to the very bottom item in here. And of course, when that is equal to 5, then we want to go item scroll rect in its vertical normalized position, and in this case we say minus equal, and the same as the rest is going to stay the same. So we decrement actually all of that stuff. Don't forget to save everything, and it's time to test. If you have any trouble with that, of course, feel free to ask me in the comments below. So now we're gonna go in and test this one out and see if everything is going to work for us. So when I now press Y, still my text is going to show up, and when I go to the number 5's position, 1 down, as you can see, it's automatically scrolling to Met Ether, mid position, and so on and so forth. Same in the other direction. When we are going up once, and while we are already at the first position, we are able to go up and down now through the complete list. When you are going fast through that, you can see there's a little offset happening into the up or in the down direction. That is because the scroll rect has one thing, or actually the spacer, I believe it is, has its vertical layer group set up, and we have a spacing of 1, but we will have that spacing only once. What we want to do is we want to increment that spacing into the top as well. So apply the changes once again to the prefab, and let's go back and so what we want to do is we want to get rid of that little movement around. If we have later on 1 trillion of items, then we want to avoid all that weird things like going up and down through all that item. As you can see, there is no scrolling internally once again left, since I just put it that number 1 in between. Okay, and still we can say we want to put this item, the high potion, now to the very end. We can, but what you can see is the blinking finger is staying at the same position. So we might go and later on take care of the blinking finger position according wherever the item is, and we maybe want to blend this one out and move up with at the same time, basically, to make sure we are not doing every weird stuff in between. So what we can do now, we can put the Sword of Fire in the very first position or in the very last position, and everything else is still working. We are still able to go back, do whatever we need, or go down later on. And yeah, that's pretty much everything for the current tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this one. And of course, you can purchase on my website the complete project files for a small fee if you want to save some time actually. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumbs this video up if you like it, and feel free to become my patron or donate by using PayPal to support me and my channel in the future. All links will be below in the description. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.